Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
Back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. Hard-hitting talk radio and TV, no doubt, starts now. It's all about the news the networks refuse to use in the traditions of our founding fathers. If it's promoting God, family, and country, we love it. If it's not, don't like it, don't care. Welcome to the broadcast. The good sheriff, Sheriff Richard Mack, is with me, president of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. You ought to become a member of the posse today, CSPOA.org. We had an incredible event last week in Puyallup, Washington, ladies and gentlemen. It was something to behold. First off, we had a press conference. The mainstream press did not show up. Yeah, they're not interested in constitutionalists telling the tale of liberty. They're not interested in no partisan politics or no partisan education. They're not interested in Americans standing behind their elected officials. They're really for the protests. Yeah, they love it. If it bleeds, it leads. That's their kind of mantra, as you well know. So it's kind of interesting. We really dug into this thing big time. They blacked us out of the press conference. However, we had an incredible show up at the event. We'll get into that in a minute. But I guess this NBC affiliate or whatever interviewed me and the leader of the church that we went to. We went to an incredible church, had a great, peaceful, secure venue. We really took the opportunity to peacefully assemble. They took the opportunity to riot and protest, and who gets the coverage? The protesters do. Interesting. Nevertheless, they had about a quarter at best of what we had at our event. How come they don't cover honest, true events? They just cover protests and riots, and when things get, they love the divide and conquer tactic. The media just proved it. The media is called King 5. It's a local affiliate, and here is the interview with me and the pastor of the church.
The people of this community and our church to help them understand the importance of backing proper legislation and the right people that we voted into office.
And Sam?
So the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association is a group started by former Sheriff Richard Mack. And Sheriff Mack was a Grand County, Arizona sheriff back in the 90s, and he was told to carry out the Brady bill under threat of arrest by Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton said, "We'll arrest you, Sheriff. Shut up and sit down. We're carrying out the Brady bill." And the sheriff said, "No, you won't." They went all the way to the Supreme Court. Sheriff Mack won. Bill Clinton lost. The issue is God-given rights, and there are jurisdictional boundaries. There's two sovereigns in America: the general government, legitimately so, with very narrow defined guidelines. It's in the Constitution, it's written. And the states have a lot more broad authority delegated by the citizens as well. So the sheriffs don't answer to the president. They answer to the people who elected them. And that election is all important because that's who they answer to, the people who elected them. Sheriff Swank answers to the people of Pierce County, not to a governor, not to a bureaucrat in Washington, to the people who elected him. In the state of Washington, the sheriff's office is under threat. And the reason it's under threat is they want to change that designation of an elected official to an appointed official. Once the sheriffs are appointed, then they will answer to those who appointed them, which means some bureaucracy somewhere. A county commission, a DA, an attorney general of the state, who knows, the governor. It'll be bureaucratic instead of elected by and for the people. The executive branch at the local level is the sheriff. So he is the highest elected authority in his county. And he answers to the citizens, but he also answers to the supreme law of the land, the Constitution at the general level, and to the state constitutions. Each state has their own constitution. And so there's checks and balances on the sheriff as well. Let's be clear, we're not suggesting he's more than he is. He has tremendous authority, but there's checks and balances that govern his authority. Checks and balances at the federal level, all the way down to the local county level. And those checks and balances, we believe, are key, and we want to make sure they remain.
And for both of you, thank you for sharing that. You're aware of what's happening just down the road,
Sure.
the main intersection. I know, Sam, you just told me off camera that you were able to go down there and speak with them, or at least try to speak with them. What is your message to people who are protesting this event tonight?
My message is, we believe in free speech. You have every right. Now be careful. You don't have a right to protest, believe it or not. You have a right to peacefully assemble. If you don't believe me, go read your First Amendment. There's a big difference between peaceful assembly versus protesting. They have every right to be on the streets and say and do what they want to as long as they don't break any laws. I support their right. But remember, it's a peaceful assembly right, not a protest right. Because the difference of protest and it getting off the rails and becoming lawless is a very thin line. A peaceful assembly is a different discussion. We are peacefully assembling right here, right now. Big difference, and I want to make sure everyone understands that difference.
Yeah, I mean, they have the right to stand there, shake their signs, have people honk their horn in affirmation, because that's the freedom that we fight for. That's the freedom I believe that the Bible gives us the right to choose. And but the problem is one side wants to silence the other side. They want to silence our voice and use the law to do that. And I believe that in order for choice to be relevant and effective, there needs to be another side that is not squashed or squelched by the government.
And was this event tonight pre-planned prior to what has happened this week?
Yes.
Okay. But ICE is what I meant.
Yes, of course, I understand. Yes.
Oh, no, I didn't see what your context was.
The context was of what the shooting in Minneapolis.
But to me, time is all that matters, though. So events don't drive what we do. Protection of our God-given rights, office, or the support of the office of sheriff is critical. We've been planning this event for quite some time, way beyond this week. Personal events or public events aside.
That's very helpful for context.
Yeah, this has been on our calendar for months, for several months, and it was given to me by the Pierce County chairman, the Republican Party. Said, "Do you want to host this?" And I said, "Absolutely," because we want to help law enforcement. They have one of the most difficult jobs on the planet, and yes, there are some bad apples in the bunch, but there's bad teachers. There's bad politicians. Nobody's trying to defund the politicians. I would probably vote for that. So I think we need to just be, real about what we're facing and pragmatic of the effects that is taking place, especially in our county, here in Pierce County.
I just have one more question, and of course, if there's anything I forgot to ask, you all have before. I know we don't have his speech written down, but Michael Flynn coming tonight. What is the point of having him here, and what are you all hoping his speech does?
So understand that in America, we have many jurisdictions. There's over 3,000 counties in the country. There's 50 states. And there is one general, limited government. And so understand that with all those different jurisdictions, vertically and horizontally, checks and balances, and jurisdictional boundaries, we believe in a principle called community policing and a principle called coordination. Community policing means that the local peace officers get to know their communities. They know who the good guys are, they know who the bad guys are, they know what the issues are, they know who may be here illegally, and they deal with all that on a very ground level. The public becomes the eyes and ears in a peaceful local jurisdiction like this. That's why it's called community policing, because they're supposed to be with the people, involved with people, understand the people, know the rhythms of their lives, right? And so with that in mind, when there's 3,000 counties, when there's 50 states, you need this principle called coordination. So we want them all to work together. They talk about comms in the military, right? Well, there's comms in the private sector as well. They communicate with one another. If somebody flees from one county to another, 2 sheriffs and their deputies can coordinate. If something happens across state lines or at a state level or at a general government level, we need them to cooperate. And the problem is things have changed. 50 years ago, 100 years ago, I probably should say, time flies when you're having fun, but chewing gum was a bad thing to do in school, right? Hey, don't chew gum. Somebody had a fist fight. Hey, don't punch him in the nose. Nowadays, things are different, right? And so we have to have a different response to that. And coordination and community policing is the key to that exercise.
And you believe?
So General Flynn can provide a national perspective and even somewhat an international perspective to all the coordination that happens up and down the line, right? That's what we want. So that's why we have General Flynn, and Sheriff Swank, because they can work together. We can have ICE work with local law enforcement. Now this is interesting, you'll find this a surprise, but we don't believe sheriffs are forced to work with ICE either. Some sheriffs that we know across the country are saying we want to work with ICE. They have every right to do that. We have some sheriffs that we defend also that say they don't want to organize. They have every right to do that as well. What they don't have the right to do, though, is interfere with legitimate delegated authority by the people and the border. And immigration is a general government delegated responsibility, but that coordination helps local sheriffs. And so understand they can decide to help or not help if they want to. Each sheriff has that choice. What they can't do is interfere because we've delegated that to the general government. So Flynn can provide a unique perspective on that, right?
So then I basically ask her a few questions. We'll get to that right after the pause. Sheriff Mack joins and provides commentary. All right, so the bottom line is then she didn't like it when I said, can I ask you some questions? She basically said, hey, I'm the interviewer. Not when you're with me, you're not. I'm always in control, baby. Don't forget that. Anyway, the interesting thing is I basically said to her, no, I'm not going to bait you with that. I know you won't answer questions. You'll just sidestep and all that. So I won't even get into that and waste my time. I just want to know your local affiliate and will the station go national and all that kind of stuff. And she said yes and yes and yes and all that. So anyway, there you have it. The bottom line is they wrote an article. It was decently fair to us, but they really covered the protesters way more than they covered us. And that's one thing that I warned her against. I said, listen, the protesters are out there kind of wreaking havoc and intimidating people. They've got maybe up to 100 people. We've got 400 people at our event. And you should really cover our event and then mention there's peaceful there's protesters out there, peaceful, intimidating, whatever you want to call it. But really, why don't you cover what's really happening here? This is where we're trying to make a difference, peaceful assembly versus protest. See, you have a right to peaceful assembly. You don't have a right to protest. Go read your First Amendment. Anyway, Sheriff, that's the summary. The reason you didn't do that interview is because you were in the VIP room where people got the opportunity to kind of meet you and shake your hand and look in your eyes. And that's one of the best ways to learn about the good sheriff and what he stands for. When you shake his hand and look into his eyes, you understand that this is real for us. This isn't just let's make money, let's get, famous. This is really about God, family, and country. Sheriff?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I thought that you did that very well. I think the right to protest, though, comes with the right to freedom of speech, because you can say anything you want as long as you're not committing a crime with your words, and sometimes that can happen. And a lot of protesters get carried away, like we've seen across our country. But I also did. I really at that point I wasn't in the mood to sit down with a reporter. Everything was starting to happen with the event, and she should have been at the press conference. And that's where we were ready, and I was ready. But at that point, I was kind of nervous about the event starting. I wanted to make sure we were starting on time, which very rarely happens at such events. And so I was really worried about the time because we had so many speakers, and I just wanted to make sure that people weren't rushing out because they were sitting so long. And we never did take a break, and that seemed to really work also. But I'm glad you did the interview, and I'm really grateful for Pastor Cummings and all that he did, and his wife and their children and everybody, all the volunteers. But I've never had a church where we went to speak treat us with such hospitality and friendliness and just and professionalism. Man, they had everything really put together and organized there big time. And that's the Experience Church in Puyallup, Washington. And boy, they are a great bunch of people, Sam, as you well know.
Yes, indeed. And I will say this. I think that Pastor Dennis Cummings did a tremendous job in the interview articulating his position, where the church stood, why they're involved. I mean, I thought he really kind of explained the public's role, the American role in what we're doing. Back in the old days in America, you had the Black Robed Regiment, and the pastors would lead by example. They'd stand up in the pulpit, tell the truth from a godly point of view, and then they'd step down and then participate like a citizen, providing incredible leadership. And it was really the glue that made the American Revolution happen. And it was really a peaceful agenda to follow Christ, but to defend religious liberty. And all liberty comes from religious liberty. Anyway, I thought he did a tremendous job in articulating the position of the church and the parishioners there as well.
Yeah, he did. And And one part in my talk, I know that you remember that I called Dawn up and had her stand by me, and
Yes,
I
sir.
wanted to give her little spill about what happened when I came home and asked her or told her that I was going to sue the federal government, but I had to get her approval, and if she hadn't given it, as you know, Sam, I would have never done this. And I thought she was
So
going to.
she reluctantly approved. Is that what you're saying, Sheriff?
She was kind of scared about it, and she even said that. She kind of flopped back. She said she flopped back on the bed, and just says, "Oh my gosh!" And um, but then she got really reflective on the spirit of the meeting between her and me at this point, and she goes, "Maybe now we know why you were supposed to be sheriff." Because we talked about that miracle a lot. Why this huge miracle election? And for me just to be, the sheriff, just doing the mundane things that sheriffs do day in, day out. Go to a class at a school, go speak at a church, help an old lady across the crosswalk, so to speak. And, yes, handle the family fights, handle uh, uh, the deaths that happen to people, the bad accidents, and sometimes a murder. We had those very, very seldom, but we did. But I said, okay, this is what a sheriff does all the time. What, why the miracle? There's nothing. And then after I got elected the second term, then it happened just a few months after that we saw what was coming with the Brady bill. And so it was, all of it was so miraculous. But Sam, during my speech, I don't know if you remember this, but I started talking about asking a question to the Attorney General who was suing Sheriff Wagner in Adams County, Washington. And I started listing the type of people and asking Attorney General Brown, does your sheriff have the right and obligation to get criminals out of his county, to get rid of the pedophiles and the human traffickers, to get rid of the sexual exploitation of children, to get rid of the murderers, to get rid of the gangs, to get rid of the Tren de Aragua gangs and the cartels and the fentanyl. And by the time I finished, I had never, ever received, in the middle of a talk, a standing ovation like that in my life. And the people were so excited about that message that we were trying to deliver to the Attorney General. And that is what I would have liked to have asked that reporter there. But I'm telling you, it would have had to have been before and because I didn't feel like doing an interview, and I'm glad you took that interview. And if I had been there, I think I would have asked her that. But my mind, really, to be honest, was preoccupied with the event that was just, a few minutes away.
All I can say is this: you're spot on. She wouldn't answer any questions, so I couldn't really. I tried, and she basically just shut down the second I said, "Hey, can we talk about this for a minute?" And the reason that I want to ask some of the reporters questions, and I think your point is well taken that you would have asked her, because it helps them get a little bit of context. It helps them understand what motivates us. It helps them kind of put what we're doing in context, not just kind of a random, these guys are doing this, the protesters are doing that. See, that just kind of creates this divide. When you provide the context of you winning at the Supreme Court, of these separations of powers, of these jurisdictional boundaries, of due process, of what the responsibility of a sheriff is to make sure that everyone gets due process. These kind of things, this context would help them actually write intelligent articles, not just divide pieces. And that's really what I was hoping for, but never got the chance.
Yeah, I would have liked to have asked her, have you ever heard of my Supreme Court case? Because obviously she hadn't. And most reporters don't know a thing about it. And so first of all, it was before their time. But secondly, it's, have you heard about the Miranda case in Arizona? And there's lots of cases they have. And she probably studied in school cases that involved the free press and stuff that affects her job or relates to her job. So I understand that not, a lot of people haven't heard about this, and a lot of sheriffs have never studied it or really looked at it. Most of them have heard about it, but they don't do anything with it. And so that's still another question I want to ask every sheriff who doesn't want to get involved with us. I'd say, would you have the responsibility to know and understand the only time in U.S. history where where sheriffs sued the federal government and won a landmark case at the U.S. Supreme Court? Would you be interested, at least curious, to know what that was all about? And so many of them are so afraid to get involved that they don't want to they don't want to know that case because they're afraid it will put them in a position where they have to do more.
Not only will it put them in a position to have to do more, but if you're a reporter and you really know the whole story, then it's really hard to write opinion hate pieces disguised as news. Because you know the truth. And that's why I want people to shake your hand and look in your eyes to understand the sincerity and the motivation about who you are and what you do and why you're on this mission. I think it's really important. And when they don't have the context, it's easy to write these pieces. Oh, Sam said a couple of things, we can attack Mac, or Mac said a couple of things, we can attack Sam. Or what we really want is them to understand the movement. It doesn't matter if they agree or disagree. We're not trying to force them to agree. A man, convinced against his opinion, he's of the same opinion still, right? If he's convinced against his will. So we understand that. But the point that we're getting at is we want people to understand the context. Even if they disagree, at least they can tell the story honestly. And that's what we're really after. So that's what that interview was about. We had a tremendous event. As I told you, the news conference was incredible. They blocked it out, but we've got the video. We're cleaning all that up now. We're going to have the videos released soon. We're going to put them on CSPOA.org. You can sign up and become a member of the posse. You can watch all those videos. We're going to do all those cool things. But we're going to come back and tell you about the rally. It was incredible. We'll tell you who spoke and the whole details. We'll break it down in seconds. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live. The good sheriff, Sheriff Richard Mack, CSPOA.org. All right, we kicked off the incredible rally that had about 400 people in attendance with a country song, ladies and gentlemen. A Penalty for Truth, great song. The lyrics certainly set the stage for the event. Sheriff?
Yeah, it sure did. I like, not only that was a great lyrics and touching, powerful lyrics, but it's great music too.
Anyway, very good, and that set the stage, and then we started putting speaker after speaker on the stage. We're developing a pattern as we cruise around the country that is really, in my opinion, sustainable. I'm writing a document, a summary of how we can take this across the country, Sheriff, in a more streamlined way. But we started out with a bunch of great local speakers explaining how the issues related to them personally. Sheriff?
Yeah, it did, and there were a few county commissioners, there were state reps, a sheriff from that area, obviously the sheriff right there, which kind of surprised me. He said his county, population-wise, is the 59th largest county in America, and it's the second largest in the state of Washington. So he is in a very powerful position. And but anyway, he was powerful, and that he just wants to do his job. He wants the state interference to stop. And if he wants to work with ICE and, as I said earlier, get all these criminals out of his county that the Biden administration and others brought in, not just allowed in, but helped bring in, then he should be able to do that. And certainly he doesn't have to ask Mother May I from anybody how to do his job in protecting the people in his county. And so that's really what the woke Democrats just don't get, because they think that their woke agenda is more important than national security and local safety.
And that really is the bottom line, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's really, that transcends partisan politics, that transcends opinion. I mean, everyone should want that, right? I mean, isn't that the point?
I thought that was the point of why we have an attorney general, and that's why we have a sheriff. And like the Constitution in Delaware, says that the sheriff in their constitution says the sheriff is the conservator of the peace. And so that's the same everywhere. Delaware was the first state. It was the one with its first constitution. And if they knew, even then, that the sheriff is the conservator of the peace, how much more so does that apply today with the horrible criminal element that we have to, that they, the sheriffs of this country, have to combat every day? And it's actually brought in by politicians, corrupt politicians who have promised to help keep us safe, and they're doing just the opposite, and they're committing treason in the process.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I don't really know where to go with this because there was so many things that I felt were just like incredible at the event. I mean, the people were laughing, the people were in tears, the people were on bated breath, waiting for the next, rest of the story. In many cases, Sheriff, it was an emotional night for everybody. It really was.
Yeah, it really was, and people were really engaged. It was probably one of the reasons, and I think that the atmosphere created by the church itself, and then opening and closing with prayer, everybody felt it from the beginning of the first prayer and the song that you mentioned, and to the end, to the last prayer. They were all very much engaged, and Flynn, General Flynn, really touched on a lot of those feelings that the people were there to share with each other. And I mean, we were, by the time that General Flynn got up, we were already there 2.5 hours. And every single person in there was so totally enthralled with his stature and his articulate form of speech. And he's been everywhere, Sam. He's been.
Yeah, and he really articulated that, how he's been in just city. I can't remember how many cities he said he was at, but it was like hundreds of cities. It was just incredible. And he really basically said, hey, the tenor of the people is frustration. The tenor of the people is to decide they don't want to be engaged. And he says, right now, we need to basically do the opposite. We need to be absolutely engaged. We don't need to be discouraged. We do realize we have something hard, but you know what? Americans are up to that, was kind of his general overarching point, right?
And what did he say that really affected you and me and maybe some of the other staff of CSPOA?
Local action, national impact.
And he even added to that. After
Yes,
he said that, he said, the constitutional sheriff is key. Wow. Okay.
It was something.
And you and I have been saying both of those for decades, but so is he. Because he knows that local action creates a national impact. And that's exactly what you and I have dedicated our lives to. And the lovely, and my lovely assistant and bride of 50 years, she and I have been doing this together for a long, long time.
And, almost as long as I've been alive, Sheriff. I hate to age you, but you've been tearing it up for a long time. And what I really liked about so Sheriff Mack rarely does this, but as he mentioned before, he brought his wife up on stage. And I'm just telling you, just to see two people that have been married for 50 years stand together in unity for God, family, and country on that stage was something, Sheriff. It really was. And I'm not, I know it's not about you personally and all that, but it really does set a standard that I think matters.
Well, there was a lot of oohing and aahing from the audience when she did come up and how she interacted with me. And that's not what I was after, but because I just really wanted to get her perspective of when this happened. And I don't remember. I think I said that it would cost us everything, but I didn't explain that very well to the audience then because I was in a hurry to stay within my time frame. But when I told Dawn that it's what I wanted to do, I told her this is going to cost us career, job. It's going to cost us our home. It's going to cost us everything. And
boy, howdy, it did that thrice
it
over,
did.
didn't it, sir?
and it did. I wish I hadn't been so correct, because it did. We financially, when we left Graham County, we basically had a little furniture and the clothes on our backs, and obviously we had some suitcases full of clothes. That was it. We still had a vehicle, but that was it. We sold our home and we left Thatcher, Arizona, went back to Provo, ran for sheriff there, and the FBI and IRS uh, raided our office where Dawn was working, and my Lucy wasn't there yet that day, but she and Dawn actually job shared being receptionist, and so Lucy wasn't off school yet. And when she got off school, she would come and take her mom's place and work there. And yeah, 1 year almost to the very day that I beat them, I beat the Clintons at the United States Supreme Court, which was June 27, 1997. On June 8th, 1998, the FBI and IRS raided my office 3 days before the election. And the headline in the Provo Daily Herald, really the only newspaper in Utah County at the time, Mack, you couldn't have made it any bigger if you had to. Mack raided by the FBI. And I lost, obviously, and all the undecided to vote. The undecided vote went to my opponent, and it was. I learned a lot. No good deed goes unpunished, and they sure took care of me. And I have not worked a day in law enforcement since then.
And by the way, the other thing to note, not only did they have that shouted from the newspaper,
Yeah.
you weren't really investigated at all. They didn't do anything to follow up. They didn't
No.
even notify you that the investigation was ended or closed, satisfactorily to you. It was just used as literally a propaganda piece. And this is where Trump and company need to gain knowledge and input about election fraud. I mean, that's one of the greatest ways to just election fraud. Same thing kind of happened with this. All these articles that were written about the event last weekend really highlighted the protesters and how bad Sheriff Swank was and how he is working with ICE, even though supposedly the Washington law says he can't. The Washington law is null and void because the Supreme Law delegates authority for the border and for immigration to Congress and to the president to carry out.
Well, add to
AKA
that,
Tom Holman, right?
Make sure everybody understands the law you were talking about is the sanctuary status of Washington State. That they're a sanctuary for the illegal immigrants.
But their sanctuary for illegal immigrant criminals is against the supreme law of the land. So which one rules? The answer, the supreme law. Sheriff Mack in seconds. You're watching the one and only Liberty Roundtable live. All right, back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. The good sheriff with me, Sheriff Richard Mack. Become a member of the posse today, CSPOA.org. We're talking about his incredible win over Bill Clinton at the Supreme Court. If you want to copy that case, the summary is available at that website as well, CSPOA.org. You can join and become a member of the posse. Watch the videos of the event you missed last weekend. We don't mean to talk about it and tell you, psych, you can't learn about it. No, we're talking about it because you can watch the videos. We're working on editing those down and getting those all separated and ready to go for everybody. So that's happening right now. But Sheriff, it's important to really realize that this battle between, quote, Washington state law and the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, these sheriffs are being literally attacked by the Attorney General of the state of Washington because the state of Washington says you've got to comply with the state of Washington, quote, statutes. The problem is they violate the supreme law of the land where the people delegated this authority to the general government. And which, takes precedent? The answer is the supreme law. I don't understand how these Washington attorney generals can even, think that state law can trump federal law. Now you say, well, wait a minute, Sam, the states created the federal government. I know. And we created jurisdictional delegation. We gave a lot of power to the states, but we gave these specific powers, they're enumerated in the supreme law of the land, to the general government, Sheriff.
Yeah, very true. Good point. And protecting our borders from invasion is one of those that you're referring to. And that's in there. And that's Article 4, Section 4. And then naturalization in Article 1, Section 8 is also a federal responsibility. The federal government has jurisdiction at the Mexico border, at the southern border. They have it also at the northern border. They also have a responsibility to protect the high seas, crimes committed on the high seas. That's in there. And the other name for that is piracies. The states like Nebraska and Iowa in the middle of our country, they are not supposed to have boats where they're sending out there and protecting the nation. That's a federal government's job and assignment. And so uh, when we try to keep giving the federal government more power than they normally have, then this is why we're in such trouble today. That the federal government believes it's a nanny state and that they're supposed to make sure everybody has equal stuff. And no, that was never. And let's see, where did the federal government get the responsibility to provide health care for every citizen in the country? That's ridiculous. It's absurd. And I still want to know the basic fundamental that the Democrat Party says government is here to make sure that people have a subsistence, a job, or as AOC put it, and Bernie Sanders, that every citizen in the country should have a basic fundamental salary, whether they're working or not, or whether they're involved or not. They should get a salary from all of the others who are working. I don't know where they get that. Well, I know.
Well, Atlas Shrugged puts that to shame, ladies and gentlemen. That's for sure. And that's kind of the epic battle that we have in America. And the problem that I really find is that people aren't listening. For example, these reporters came in and their goal was they were told by their superiors, go and cover the protest, see what, how crazy it gets or whatever. They came inside the church. They were talking to the pastor. They were talking to the CEO of the CSPOA. We were very civil and kind and peacefully assembling. And, their view, and I don't mean to speak for them, but they won't answer questions, so I can't let them speak for themselves, right? That's the problem. So I will be forced to speak for them and assess my opinion. They wanted Jerry Springer. When they came in and talked to us, they got common sense, a logical explanation, agree or disagree, a very peaceful, kind, well-articulated message. And they're like, that ain't going to get us no readers. Come on. And that's really, in my opinion, what they're after. They weren't really listening to everything we had to say. And why do I say that? Because they wrote an article and it talked about the protesters. It talked about the sheriff. And then at the very bottom, it kind of said, oh, and by the way, the CSPOA and Sam and the pastor and all those guys are trying to defend the office of sheriff from being destroyed. There's bills in the legislative body of Washington State right now aimed at destroying that. And the sheriff, and so what they focused on is, hey, the shooting in Portland, the shooting in Minnesota, comments the sheriff might have made about that. They weren't really interested in any of the productive, peaceful redress of grievance, kind of an idea that we were working through at the time. They weren't interested in that, Sheriff, really at all.
Well, and the comparison is the elephant in the room. Sam, when was the last time any of these same protesters or the Democrats in office that are really upset with Trump, when was the last time they ever reached out and said, you know what? We really have a problem. And Laken Riley was murdered by an illegal alien. What protests did they ever give then? She was murdered. This lady in Minneapolis that got shot by the cop, according to lethal force rules and protocols, he did not commit a murder. He did not. But this Laken Riley was murdered by an illegal alien. When was the last time you saw anything from a Democrat or heard anything from a Democrat anywhere in the country that expressed outrage or condolences to the family regarding Laken Riley? And she's not the only one. There have been many of those taking place. In fact, a cop
and the thing is, since we don't rage in front of the media and the cameras and create Jerry Springer-esque view, then we don't get covered, and the truth of that you're pointing out isn't really covered, right?
Right. Yeah, and the hypocrisy of all of this. How many Democrats came forward and said, Ashley Babbitt, when she trespassed in the United States Capitol, was shot and killed. and she was not carrying a gun. She provided no threats towards anyone. She didn't say, "Hey, we're coming in to kill you, officer," or "We're going to kill you," or whatever else. She made no threats whatsoever. And yet this cop, after the fact, said, "Oh, well, I felt my life was in danger." So he shot a 150-pound former Marine that was not carrying any type of weapon whatsoever and was merely committing trespass. There are no protocols for using lethal force against her at that time. None. But no one in Washington, D.C., no Democrat anywhere said anything about her being killed, murdered by the Capitol police officer. In fact, he was completely exonerated and promoted. So this is what the Democrats really present to the world about the farce known as lethal force on this protest.
Well, I want to know what you think was the best part of the night in your opinion. You know, everybody had different kind of parts they liked. I've asked a lot of people this question, and some would say the whole thing, some would point out a specific speaker, et cetera, et cetera. What was kind of your favorite part of the night, Sheriff?
Well, first of all, I really enjoyed being there with my son and my wife, and that was heartwarming for me and touching. But at the same time, I've done that with them before, as you know. Aside from General Flynn being the keynote speaker, my favorite point, my favorite issue, my favorite time, my favorite speech was C.L. Bryant. He's a very dark complected man. He's a former member of the NAACP. He is a pastor. And I really thought that he was extremely effective, extremely powerful, extremely spiritual, in touch and in tune with everything going on there. Very accommodating, very outgoing, very friendly, and a powerful message of freedom and the return to the basic fundamental principles that America was founded upon. I think he touched me probably more than anybody else.
He was a powerful speaker. It was tremendous. I think the crowd really had a wonderful time too. One of the things that I wanted to highlight to everybody is, you know, they paid $17.76 to attend. And it's not that we really want to make a bunch of money, but we do need to cover our costs of travel. And I mean, everything is expensive. The point that I'm getting at is I wanted to stand up and say, hey, was it worth $17.76?
Oh, yeah.
And of course, the answer would be yes, indeed. And then I would basically say, because the people who gave their lives, their wealth, their sacred honor, their all to the cause in 1776, they thought you were worth it. And that's really kind of an important point that I think people need to understand. And that's why I think the 1776 works so well, because it highlights what they did for us and now what we must do for them to keep this sacred cause of liberty alive. It's about religious liberty, and that's why we are so delighted to have it in a church, Sheriff.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, that's what every church should be doing. Same thing. And we really need to shout this from the housetops and to everyone, from our churches, from our schools. You know, Abraham Lincoln said that let the Constitution be the political religion of the country. And that's really something that the Catholic Church, the LDS Church, all the churches should be uniting to make sure that happens.
Ladies and gentlemen, we the people have a lot of work to do. You're going to help us? We sure pray the answer is yes. And we also pray you'll engage in a campaign for civility. We got to do it peacefully and kind and respectfully. And, well, we the American people have a lot to learn, don't we? Sheriff Mack, thank you so much, sir. We'll chat soon.
Thank you, Sam.
The Good Sheriff, ladies and gentlemen. Become a member of the posse today, CSPOA.org. I'm Sam Bushman. We're syndicated by the Loving Liberty Networks, lovingliberty.net. Spread the word, share the love, and God save the Republic of the United States of America.